In order not to be too long, this story is completely true. It happened to one of my relatives, so put your headphones on and enjoy the story. The woman with whom the story happened says, "My name is Sarah from Damascus, and I am 20 years old. I was living in our house with my father and mother. In 1995 AD, I got engaged to a person I did not know from the same city as me, and after a short period, my father agreed to my marriage to him, and after 3 months, I consummated the marriage and went to his house. As for me, he was friendly with me, and I began to know him more after I married him. I was so afraid that my life with you would be tragic. But it was quite the opposite. His treatment of me was good, and he treated me like a 6-year-old child. I found peace and security with him. One day I told myself to bring some flowers and plants and put them as decoration for the house, because the house in which my husband and I lived was missing a lot of things, so the house consists of 2 floors. We lived on the ground floor, and the upper floor had a room that was completely empty. So I asked him to bring me soil for planting and some seeds of beautiful plants, and he said to me, "Okay." After about a week, he brought me the things I asked him for. Then we started adding dirt to the pots, and then planted the seeds. After about a week, plants began to appear on the surface of the dirt, and as I remember, that was on a Friday. The next day, my husband was at work, and I was sitting alone, and a few minutes after sunset, before it was completely dark, I heard water running from the bathroom, as if someone was taking a shower. I said out loud, "My love, are you here?" Then he didn't answer me. I thought my husband came home early from work and went to the bathroom. Then I said to him out loud, "Are you in the bathroom?" Then he did not answer, so I got up to see where this sound was coming from. So I approached the bathroom door. I said, "Don't joke with me like that. Come on, show yourself." There was no answer at all, so I started to have doubts. Then I went to the kitchen, took the knife, and went to the bathroom. I walked slowly and suddenly opened the door, but a sudden malfunction occurred in one of the water taps, so I said to myself, my heart almost stopped from fear. So I waited for my husband to come back so he could fix this problem. At night I was sleeping, and suddenly I opened my eyes and shuddered, and I didn't know what happened to me. I was just afraid. This was the first strange thing that happened to me, and after a few minutes I calmed down a little and went back to sleep. The next day, as usual, my husband would leave for work early and not return until the evening, and sometimes he would not return until late. I was in the kitchen preparing food, and then I heard the sound of a child crying, but the sound was far away. I said, "It is certain that the source of the sound comes from the street, that is, from outside the house." However, I began to notice that the voice gradually rose and was intermittent, that is, it stopped for a while and then returned to crying again. I didn't pay much attention to this matter, but after a few minutes the sound began to get closer and closer until it seemed like it was coming from the main door of the house. So I went to check it, and when I opened the door of the house, I did not find anything. To the right of the main door, there was a staircase leading to the upper floor. I noticed that the sound was coming from above, so I went up to see the room in front of me. The door of the room was small and had no windows, so that sunlight or any light entered the room only through the door. As I approached the door, I saw for a moment a woman dressed in black, standing in the darkness of the room with a small child in her hand. Yes, I'm not under any illusions. I saw her, but only for about a second. This is what I told my husband in the hospital, because it is possible that when I saw this woman, I fainted at that time. I opened my eyes and found myself in the hospital. That's all I remember. The next day, I was discharged from the hospital and went home. I was very scared. That day, I didn't notice anything at all, and 2 days later, or 3, it was a Friday, and it was a holiday, so my husband decided to move the flower pots to the top so that the sunlight could reach them, and we put plastic plants in their place as decoration for the house. At night, around 2 in the morning, I woke up to a groaning sound, like the sound of an old man taking his last breath. I tried to wake my husband, but he was very tired, and did not wake up. Then the sound stopped, and after about half an hour, I again heard the sound of footsteps coming from the upper floor. So I thought that a thief had jumped onto the roof of our house, but it was not one person, but more. In the morning, I told my husband everything that had happened at night, and he immediately went out and brought a worker to install an iron door at the end of the stairs leading to the top. But the matter did not end that simple. Every day I heard the sound of laughter, and things like keys or coins would disappear, then appear after a while in places where it was impossible to put them. Sometimes I would wake up at night to the sound of crying. One day I was sitting in the bedroom and I saw a black cat emerge from under the bed and quickly run out of the room. It was very fast and then it disappeared completely. About a year later, I gave birth to my first child. He was just like me and he was beautiful. On the day I gave birth, I was in bed and very tired. My husband was in the kitchen and I felt someone pulling the covers off me. I opened my eyes to find in front of me an old man dressed in white and also had a white beard. His face was clearly angry. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Then he turned and went out the door of the room. At this moment, I was able to scream, so my husband came in and said, "What happened?" I said, "There was an old man in front of me." So he went out looking for him but found no trace of him. He disappeared and then said to me, "You are really tired. Go back to sleep." Then the days started to pass, and these strange things happened to me, but I could bear it because we could not change the house. And in the second year this time, I gave birth to a girl and she also looked like me and was very beautiful. She had a white face, light hazel eyes, and dark black hair. It was really very beautiful. During this period, I stopped having children due to the deterioration of my health. I got a little crazy and was taken to a mental institution, but before I got sick, I saw two children who were playing with my children when I was in the kitchen and they were in the room, and I heard children's voices different from my children's voices. One day, the bedroom door was slightly open, and I looked to be surprised by two children, completely stripped of their clothes. They were sitting like my children. Their shapes were strange, and when they sensed my presence, they disappeared in an instant. After this incident, my appearance changed, and I began to talk to myself. Sometimes I even spoke to people who did not exist at all, and after I was transferred to the sanatorium, I found peace. I was staying in a place of my own and not in a group sanatorium, thanks to my husband, because he was paying money to the nurses to take care of me, and after a few months I completely improved, and our house remained empty all this time because my husband went to stay with his parents and took my children with him, and after a period of improvement, I was discharged from the hospital, but this time I refused to return home and went to my father's house. My mother, after a difficult discussion with my husband, was able to convince him to rent a house in the countryside, far from the city, especially far from the house where I lived the worst years of my life. The days began to pass, and on January 12, 1999 AD, I gave birth to a child, but this time he looked a lot like his father, and time began to pass quickly while we were in the new house. During this period, I did not notice anything strange at all, and after approximately 12 years, in the year 2012 AD, and in the summer, problems began to occur. There were protests in the country, and the war began to approach the village in which we lived, and in 1 week the war broke out in the village. There was nowhere to go, and at that time the city was the only place that was still good. There was no solution but to return to that damned house. When we arrived, the house was very dirty, so we started cleaning. From the first day, my daughter was wiping the dust from the mirror, and suddenly she saw it on the side of her left shoulder. The face of a woman. Her eyes were white, and her face was slightly burned. At the same moment she saw this face, the mirror shattered into small parts, and these parts turned into fragments, and my daughter was injured several times. She started screaming and blood was pouring from her face. At this moment I realized that these strange things were still there, but there was no solution. We had to face it with all our might, so I sat my kids down. I told them about the ones that happened to me many years ago. I told them we have to face this, and at night, my youngest son woke up and went to the bathroom. When I woke up, I did not find him in his bed. You said he would be back soon, but he's a little late, so I got up to check on him and found him passed out in the bathroom. I tried to wake him up and he opened his eyes. I said to him, "What brought you to this place?" Here he said, "I don't know," so I put him back on his bed, and before I entered my room, I heard the voice of a young girl singing, and the source of the sound was coming from the direction of the stairs. So I walked slowly towards the sound and saw a young girl sitting there. She was playing with her hair and singing, but she did not look scary. She was beautiful. She looked at me, then laughed and went upstairs. I did not dare follow her. The next day, the situation was stable and we would not notice anything. Minutes after sunset, my eldest son came. He told me, "I saw an old man who was sitting in the room on the top floor, and he was looking at me and he looked angry." At this moment, I began to collect the events that had happened to me. There was an old man, a woman, a young child, and a young girl. Is this a family living with us in the house? So I said to myself, but there was nothing in the first 2 months when I was newly married. Then I remembered that I noticed something and forgot to ask my husband about him when he brought dirt for us to plant plants with. It was not placed in bags like the dirt designated for agriculture, so I said there must be a secret or something in this dirt or the plants. However, the plants withered many years ago, and only dirt remains. That night, strange sounds filled the house in an unusual way. I could hear as if someone was stirring plates and bowls in the kitchen, and the sound of water coming from the bathroom. We couldn't sleep that night. The next day, at noon, I gathered my courage and went upstairs. When I got there, in front of me was the dark room and the pots of dirt around it, so I went forward and grabbed the first pot and emptied it of the dirt. I started spreading dirt on the ground and found very small bone remains. Then I started grabbing the pots and emptying them on the floor, and here was the shock. In addition to the bone remains, I found a piece of cloth tightly wrapped with a string and tied to a small piece of bone that was certainly a human bone. I did not dare to open it. Then I called my husband and said, "He must come immediately and bring with him someone who has knowledge about magic matters." And I told him that I found something strange inside the earthen containers. When he came and brought the person with him, I decided to take the children out of the house to another place. Then he opened the piece of cloth and found a paper on which was written in Syriac and the names of the people in Arabic. These names were a man, a woman, and 4 children. When I heard the names of the people, I immediately recognized them and their story, which occurred between 1980 and 1992 AD. They are a family consisting of a father, mother, and 4 children. The mother killed her 4 children, the eldest daughter, age 5, 2 twin children, age 3, and an infant. The method of killing them was to cover their eyes with a piece of cloth, then cut off their heads one by one, then put their bodies in a hole. Then she stood over them and burned herself over the corpses. After this incident, the father became insane and then threw himself from a high place and died. He was buried with his wife and children, so this magic was made for that family, but how the magic and the remains of the bones got into the dirt that my husband brought to the house, I do not have an answer, because it is possible that it was by chance. And then what was left of the dirt was taken in addition to the magic by the person who, my husband, brought it to dispose of it and put it in a place away from people's eyes and hands. And after that, we no longer saw or heard any sound or strange thing in the house. We are now in the year 2024 AD, and I have grandchildren. My eldest son got married and had 2 girls. The eldest is 8 years old, and the second is 6 years old. My daughter gave birth to 2 children, ages 9 and 7. My youngest son got married 2.5 years ago, and now has a 1-year-old girl. This is my story, and because one of the haters performed magic on that family that died without any sin, we must be careful not to carry in our hearts any grudge, hatred, or hatred for anyone so that we do not fall into such mistakes, because many people resort to magic and sorcery in order to take revenge, and for various reasons. It has no value. The end. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell button to to receive all new updates.